What if the one choice meant to save your life brought someone who would change it forever? That was the question hanging over Josiah Kent like a noose as the train from Denver screamed into Salvation Creek. The high desert sun glared down on the small wooden station. Heat shimmered off the tracks, turning the world into a wavering mirage of dust and old regrets. Josiah wiped the grit from his brow, though it did nothing to stop how raw he felt inside. He was a good man, but a failing one. His ranch was dying. His cattle were gone. His well had dried up after his neighbor, Bartholomew Shaw, accidentally bought the land upstream, and the banknote was due in a week. He had tried everything. Hard work, long nights, cutting costs. Nothing worked. So he had taken the final step no proud man wanted to take. He ordered a mail-order bride. The Matrimonial Times advertisement had cost him almost everything he had left. Temperate rancher, 40, seeks sturdy woman of good character for partnership in life and labor. One woman replied, Annie from New Orleans. Her handwriting had been neat, her letter short. She'd agreed to come. He expected a plain woman with sensible shoes. Maybe a widow, maybe someone as desperate as he was, someone who wouldn't mind dust, drought, or debt. He didn't expect what stepped off that train. The whistle shrieked. Steam blasted across the platform like a living thing. Mrs. Henrietta Gable, the town's unofficial moral judge, watched from the general store porch with a pinched face that could sour milk. Sheriff Brody leaned against a post across the tracks, smirking under the shadow of his dull badge. Everyone was watching him, expecting him to fail. The train hissed to a stop. A few passengers climbed down, a salesman, a family of worn-out homesteaders. No single woman. No one who looked like she might be Annie. Josiah's stomach clenched. Had she changed her mind? Had he made a fool of himself? "That's everyone," the conductor called. Josiah's chest sank. This was it. He was finished. But then a shadow moved in the doorway of the Pullman car. A silhouette. A figure standing still as the smoke curled around her. Slowly, she stepped out onto the platform. The entire town went silent. She was nothing like what Josiah had imagined. Nothing like anyone in Salvation Creek had ever seen. Her traveling suit was deep burgundy, tailored to perfection, fitting her like it had been sewn by someone who understood elegance. Her hat rested at a graceful angle over hair coiled neat and fine. Her posture was calm, sure, sharp. Her skin was a rich, dark coffee color that stood bold against the dusty world around them. She didn't lower her eyes. She didn't shrink. She moved with quiet power. Her boots clicked against the wooden steps, each sound like a hammer on Josiah's heart. A porter struggled behind her with a steel-bound trunk so heavy it needed both hands. She carried only a small leather satchel. When her gaze swept the platform and landed on Josiah, he felt his chest tighten. His breath caught. This was not Annie. This was a woman carved by confidence, not desperation. She stopped inches from him. "Mr. Josiah Kent?" she asked. Her voice was steady, clear, not soft, not weak. A voice that belonged to someone used to giving direction, not waiting for it. Josiah, a man who had fought drought, fire, and debt, suddenly couldn't speak. His tongue refused to work. His hat felt too small in his hands. His heart hammered like it wanted out of his chest. She raised one eyebrow. "Mr. Kent, I am Anelise Dubois. I believe you were expecting me." A stillness fell over the town. Mrs. Gable's fan froze mid-air. Sheriff Brody let out a low laugh that echoed across the boards. "Well now," Brody called loudly, "looks like Kent ordered from the wrong catalog." The laughter burned through Josiah's ears. Shame, anger, fear. But something in him snapped back. A hard line straightened his bones. He turned to the sheriff, his voice low and cold. "Brody, you will keep quiet. This lady is my guest." The sheriff blinked in surprise. The town murmured. Then Josiah finally managed to tip his hat toward her. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough, "welcome to Salvation Creek." She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She simply gave a small, sharp nod, as if he had passed a test he didn't know he was taking. "Thank you, Mr. Kent," she said. "Shall we?" He lifted her satchel. It was heavier than it looked. The porter wrestled the steel-bound trunk into the wagon. Josiah helped her into the seat beside him, aware of every stare drilling into his back as he flicked the reins and rolled out of the station. The silence in the wagon was tight, thick. The mules plodded along the dusty road toward the Bartholomew ranch, but Josiah's mind was spinning. Who was she? Why was she here? Her letter had said Annie, not Anelise. Her handwriting had been elegant, yes, but he'd expected someone humble, tired, hoping for a place to belong. The woman beside him looked nothing like a desperate bride. She didn't glance at him. She didn't ask foolish questions. She watched the land like she was measuring it, like she was studying something only she understood. Finally, she spoke. "That ridge," she said. "Who owns it?" Quote. He blinked. The question was so sharp it almost cut him. "Shaw," he answered. "Bartholomew Shaw owns most everything you see." "I noticed," she said. There was something in her tone he couldn't place. Knowledge? Calculation? They passed the dry creek bed that had once fed his entire ranch. She stared at it a long moment. "What happened here?" she asked. Josiah sighed. "My water ran dry 2 years ago, soon as Shaw bought upstream." "Convenient," she said. It wasn't a question. Josiah looked at her again. Something unsettling moved behind her calm eyes. Something sharp. Something dangerous. He swallowed. "Ma'am," he said, trying to steady himself, "I think there's been some mistake. A terrible mistake. This isn't the life you expected." She finally turned to him. "You misunderstand the arrangement, Mr. Kent." "What do you mean?" "I am not here to seek comfort," she said. "I am here for your ranch." A chill ran through him. What did she mean? The mules crested the hill, and his ranch came into view. The peeling paint, the sagging barn roof, the dying fields, the lonely, sun-beaten house. He braced himself for her reaction. Shock, horror, disgust. Instead, she said one word: defensible. Josiah's breath caught again. Defensible? Against what? He stared at her, realizing with new fear and new curiosity that the woman beside him was not what she pretended to be. Not a bride. Not Annie. Not even close. And whatever she truly was, Salvation Creek was not ready for her. He wasn't sure he was either. The air inside the Bartholomew house felt tight, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Josiah stood in the doorway, still dusty from the road, watching the woman who wasn't Annie step across his porch like she owned nothing and feared even less. She didn't ask where the bedroom was. She didn't ask where the kitchen was. She didn't even ask if she could come in. She walked straight toward the window and studied the dry creek bed like it was a crime scene. Josiah finally found his voice. "Ma'am." "Anelise, I think we got off track somewhere. The agency never said anything about my complexion?" She finished calmly. He froze. "No," he said, flushing red. That's not what I meant." Quote. She lifted her chin slightly. "Did you ask for a white bride, Mr. Kent?" He shook his head fast. "No, ma'am. I never wrote anything like that." "Then there is no mistake," she said. "Not on my side." He swallowed. "But the life here, it's harsh. It isn't fit for a lady like you." She turned toward him, her face unreadable. "Mr. Kent," she said, "I did not come here for comfort. I came for the ranch." His stomach twisted. "What do you mean, the ranch?" She didn't soften her tone. She didn't blink. "You are the only man in this valley who still holds land Shaw has not taken," she said. "That makes you valuable. And it makes your ranch the only foothold for what needs to be done." "What needs to be done?" Josiah whispered. She looked back toward the window, toward the land Shaw was choking dry. "Justice," she said simply. Before he could speak, a single rifle shot cracked through the canyon. Crack! Josiah grabbed the old Winchester from over the mantel. "Stay inside," he ordered. "That would be unwise," she answered, already stepping toward the opposite window. He turned, shocked. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't afraid. She held something in her hand. Sleek, silver, deadly. A revolver unlike any he'd seen in this valley. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "A lady must travel prepared," she said. "Prepared?" That didn't even scratch the truth. A voice called from the ridge. "Josiah Kent, you home?" Quote. Josiah sagged in relief. "It's just Pete Mulligan, neighbor of sorts." "No one is just a neighbor in land ruled by a tyrant," she said softly. "Let's see which he is." Josiah stepped onto the porch. Pete sat on his mule 50 yards away, squinting under the sun. "Josiah," Pete called, "heard you brought home company." He spat tobacco. "The whole town's talking. Say you lost your marbles." Josiah forced a stiff smile. "People say a lot of things." Pete leaned forward, voice dropping. "Shaw's men came by this morning. Said Shaw's done waiting. He wants your land, Josiah. And he wants it now." Josiah felt the ground shift under him. Before he could answer, a calm voice drifted from behind him. "And how did your wife pass, Mr. Mulligan?" Quote. Anelise stepped into the sunlight like she was stepping onto a stage. Pete jolted so hard his mule danced sideways. "Ma'am," he stammered. "Your wife," Anelise repeated. 3 years ago, after Dr. Jameson arrived in town." Pete's face tightened. "What's that to you?" "Everything," she said. The medicine he sold her was poison, arsenic and lead, produced by a company owned by Bartholomew Shaw. Pete froze. Josiah stared. How could you know that?" Pete whispered. "My trunk," she said. "The heavy one. It's full of evidence, ledgers, shipping papers." Then she stepped forward and dropped the truth like a hammer. "I am not a mail-order bride." Pete swore under his breath. Josiah's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. She kept going. "I am a Pinkerton agent. I have been tracking Shaw for 6 months. He is responsible for stolen land, poisoned medicine, illegal foreclosures, and at least 1 murder." The silence hit like a cannon blast. Even the wind stopped moving. Josiah felt his whole world tilt. "A Pinkerton?" he echoed. She nodded once. "You sent me a letter," he said. "You lied." "My job requires deception, Mr. Kent," she said. "And your ranch was the only place Shaw did not own. I needed it. I needed you." He should have been furious. He should have ordered her off his land. Instead, he felt something stir inside him. Not anger, but something dangerous. Hope. "He'll kill us if he finds out," Josiah said quietly. "He won't," she replied. "Not yet." As if summoned by her words, another gunshot cracked. This one much closer. Pete jerked his reins. "That wasn't a warning shot." Josiah moved to the porch rail. 2 riders were approaching from the ridge. The Frank brothers, Shaw's hired guns. "They're heading for your house," Pete yelled. Josiah barely had time to shout before the Frank brothers opened fire. Bang! Bang! Splinters exploded from the porch as bullets tore through the boards. "Get down!" Josiah shouted, grabbing Anelise's arm. But she didn't duck. She looked toward the back of the house, thinking faster than any woman or man he'd ever seen. "They're trying to pin us," she said. "They think we'll run." She dropped her satchel and pulled out something that turned Josiah's blood to ice. "Dynamite." "Ma'am." "No time," she cut in. "Cover me." "With what?" "Your voice. Yell at them." He stared, stunned. "Yell," she ordered. So with bullets flying and heat rising off the burning barn, Josiah Kent did the strangest thing of his life. He stood up behind the wagon and started shouting every insult he knew at 2 armed killers. Behind him, Anelise vanished into the gully with the dynamite in hand. Minutes stretched like rope pulled too tight. Then, boom! The ground shook, the porch lifted, dust and wood sprayed into the air. A scream cut through the smoke. The front door slammed open. Walt Frank stumbled out, coughing and blind with dust, and behind him, rising through the smoke like a ghost, came Anelise Dubois. Face streaked with soot, blouse torn, revolver steady. She dragged Jesse Frank by the collar and dropped him at her feet like a broken tool. "Mr. Frank," she said coldly. "Talk or join your brother." Walt dropped to his knees, hands shaking. "Don't shoot! I'll tell you everything!" Josiah felt his knees weaken. This was no bride, this was a storm, and she had just chosen to land on his ranch. The barn was gone by nightfall. Nothing but a smoking skeleton of beams and ash stood where Josiah's father had once hammered every nail by hand. The loss cut him deep, but the house still stood, barely scorched, saved only because a woman he'd known for less than a day had blown up his root cellar on purpose. Inside the kitchen, 3 lanterns burned low. Josiah, Anelise, and Pete Mulligan sat at the table with the steel-bound trunk open between them. It was not full of dresses. It was full of truth. Ledgers, bank slips, freight orders, and weapons. Josiah stared at the thick leather ledger on top. "This is Shaw's real bank book?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Anelise said. "The one he hides from the law, the one he never expected anyone to steal." "And you stole it?" Pete asked. She didn't blink. "Of course. I am a Pinkerton agent. We don't knock politely." Pete let out a low whistle. "You're something fierce, ma'am." Quote. Josiah wasn't sure fierce was the word. She was something else. Something the town had never seen before. Something he wasn't sure he deserved to sit in the same room with. Anelise flipped the ledger open. "Here," she said, tapping a page with the edge of her nail. "This line lists illegal interest charges against the Bar K Ranch. Shaw has been inflating your debt for months. You never had a chance." Josiah exhaled hard. He'd suspected it. Shaw had always been a vulture, but seeing it written, stamped, and signed in Shaw's own handwriting tore something inside him. "So what now?" he asked. "Now," Anelise said, "we bring him down before he destroys anyone else." Pete scratched his chin. "How? Shaw's got guns, money. Half the town in his pocket." "He doesn't have the town's trust anymore," Anelise replied. "Not after today. People saw the smoke from your ranch. They know Shaw doesn't play honest." Josiah leaned forward. "Tell me the plan." She looked at him, steady and sure. "Tomorrow at noon, you will go to Shaw's bank alone. You will look broken, desperate, defeated. He will think he's won. He will lower his guard." "And you?" Josiah asked. "I will hold a town meeting," she said. "At the church, the only building Shaw does not control." Pete blinked. "Church ain't open on Monday." "It will be tomorrow." She tapped her trunk. "And when everyone is inside, I will read this ledger out loud." Josiah froze. "Shaw will kill you before you get a single-page read." "Not if the town stands with us," she said. "People fight hardest when they finally see the chains they've been living under." For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Josiah nodded. "I'll play the fool," he said. "I've had enough practice." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You are not a fool, Mr. Kent." But there was no time to answer. They had only a few hours before morning. The next day, Salvation Creek felt different. People watched shadows. Doors stayed half open. Fear moved through the streets like wind through tall grass. At 11, Josiah rode into town on his lame mare. Soot still stained his shirt. He kept his shoulders slumped, his hat low, his voice weak as he stepped into the bank. Bartholomew Shaw sat behind his polished oak desk with Sheriff Brody standing guard. Shaw smiled like a wolf who finally cornered his prey. "Kent," Shaw said, spreading his hands, "you look awful." Josiah lowered his head. "My ranch burned. She ran off." I've got nothing left." Quote. Brody snorted. "Told you, Shaw. Man can't even keep a woman he bought." Josiah didn't react. He kept his voice cracked, small. "I just need an extension. Just 1 month, please." Shaw picked up Josiah's foreclosure papers, tapped them neat, and set them back down. "The answer is no," Shaw said. "Sign the deed over at noon." Josiah nodded like a beaten dog. "Yes, sir." He left the bank with dragging steps. Shaw lifted his brandy glass. "See, Sheriff," he said, "order always wins." Across the street, inside the small white church, the pews were full. Mrs. Gable, Mr. Coleman, the blacksmith, the stable owner, ranchers who had lost everything, townsfolk who had lived under Shaw's boot for years. Preacher Lyle hovered nervously near the vestry door. Then the room quieted as Anelise Dubois stepped to the pulpit, calm and steady, holding Shaw's ledger in her hands. "My name is Anelise Dubois," she said, "and Salvation Creek deserves the truth." The doors banged open. Shaw stormed in with Brodie and 2 hired guns. "This meeting is illegal," Shaw roared. "This woman is a liar." Anelise didn't flinch. She opened the ledger. "On August 4th, she said loudly, "Ezra Coleman's son lost his homestead in a rigged poker game. Sheriff Brodie was paid $500 by Mr. Shaw the same morning." All eyes turned to Brodie, his face drained to chalk. Shaw snapped, "Sheriff, arrest!" "No," Brodie whispered. "Arrest them!" Shaw screamed. Brodie's hand twitched toward his holster, but from the choir loft, Pete Mulligan cocked his buffalo rifle. "Go on, Sheriff," Pete said. "Give me a reason." Brodie's hand dropped. Anelise kept reading. "Illegal interest rates, fake land deeds, poisoned medicine, stolen water rights." Every sentence cracked the town wide open. Shaw turned red, then purple, then something darker. "You need a U.S. Marshal," he spat. "And there isn't one within 200 miles. A calm voice answered from the vestry. "That," said a tall man with a mustache and a star on his duster, "is where you're wrong." Marshal Gregory Pike stepped forward with 2 deputies. "Bartholomew Shaw," Pike said, "you're under arrest." Shaw lunged for the pulpit, but Josiah stepped out from the front pew and hit him with the butt of his rifle, dropping him into silence. The church erupted, not with panic, but relief. Salvation Creek had finally woken up. The chains were broken. A week later, the 3:10 train waited at the station. Shaw was gone in irons. Brodie, too. The town was rebuilding. The creek was running again. Anelise stood beside her steel-bound trunk in a neat blue traveling suit. She was leaving for Denver. The Pinkerton agency needed her. "You did it," Josiah said quietly. "You saved the ranch." She shook her head once. "You saved it, Josiah. You chose to stand up." He swallowed. "You could stay." "I can't. I'm a detective. I chase truth, not quiet." The conductor called for boarding. She stepped onto the train. Then she paused, turned back. "Josiah," she said softly, "the Denver office is large. Pinkertons need field associates who know the land and who know how to be brave even when they're scared." He stared at her. "I'm not asking as an agent. I'm asking as a partner." The whistle blew. Josiah Kent didn't answer with words. He just grabbed her heavy steel trunk, hauled it aboard, and stepped into the Pullman car beside her. He didn't look back. "Where to first, partner?" he asked. Her smile was small, but real. "Wherever the truth takes us." And together they rode toward a new life, one built not on desperation, but on courage, justice, and a partnership no one in the West would ever forget.